Breathe. Fuck. What's happening?
Okay. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Just stay still. Okay? Don't move.
We are talking about the psychological horror movie Witches in the Woods. This one is directed by Jordan Barker, who directed the 2013 movie Torment, and stars Hannah Kasulka, Alexander DeJordy, and Craig Arnold. So it's the story of a group of friends as they are travelling to some type of ski resort, I believe it is, to go kind of snowboarding and stuff, and they end up trying to kind of get a shortcut by going through a wooded area where there's essentially a kind of dirt path. Inevitably kind of get lost and get stranded out in the kind of the middle of the wilderness. Early on in the movie, we kind of see that one of the group picks up this leaflet saying that there was these kind of witch trials and such, and these things led to various kind of paranoia in this particular kind of area, obviously a long time ago. And as these kind of group kind of start, their kind of nerves start to get frazzled, because obviously they are in some type of situation here which is potentially dangerous. Cut off, no phone signal, the car's not working, obviously it's getting particularly cold, paranoia starts to set in, and there may well be a case of possession perhaps, or maybe it's something else. So let's discuss Witches in the Woods. So before we go any further, I have to ask you this question. Do you like movies that are open to interpretation? If the answer is yes, then you may like this movie. If the answer is no, then you may not. But let's talk about what works first of all, then we'll kind of circle round to that. For me, one of the key strengths of this movie is the cinematography. There is some absolutely fantastic camera work here. Great use of the kind of the surroundings, the kind of the natural environment. Really good use of things like the lighting, the way the light kind of bounces off the snow to kind of create this kind of eerie effect, and just kind of like just the cinematography in general I thought was absolutely fantastic and lends for a good creepy atmosphere. The other thing I would say I enjoyed with this movie is the fact that our characters are somewhat grey. Now, in a lot of kind of horror films, you'll get a variety of stock characters, all of whom have certain character traits. And this is true to a degree of this movie. But I actually kind of like the fact that a lot of these characters are not your typical kind of, oh, this one's going to bite it because they are, they're a nasty person, or this one's a good person. Even arguably our protagonist, who is this particular girl, she's actually having an affair with another guy, behind the back of her boyfriend, who is one of the kind of the other kind of members of this group. So she isn't kind of like a whiter than white protagonist. She actually is, doing the dirty in her boyfriend, and even the boyfriend is kind of like painted to be somewhat of a dickhead, but not completely. There's a kind of a subplot here in regards to the a potential. Well, let's just call it a kind of a backstory from one of the other characters that involves something, quite a bad crime that he kind of may have tangentially been involved with, but not directly, and kind of it gives this kind of like this the impression here that obviously the characters have there's a lot of mixture here in regards to their backstory and their characterization. So I quite like the fact here that we don't have your typical great good characters, your virginal characters, and your kind of your asshole characters who are obviously going to be cannon fodder and stuff like that. All the characters here have a degree of culpability in regards to things that happen within the movie, and also their kind of their characters to that point have a degree of both good and bad within them. I think the acting here as well is actually pretty good from the cast. Everyone does a good job of giving some good performances here, and believable kind of upward spiral, downward spiral really, into kind of like the descent into madness. So what doesn't work here? I've got to say, I think this movie it ends up being a little bit silly. Now, the movie is called The Witches in the Woods. Now, when you're watching this movie, you're watching it knowing it's a horror film, okay? And it's called Witches in the Woods, and there's creepy music and things like this. But try and kind of take away your mind out of that kind of situation and try and put it in the situation of had this happened to you. You wouldn't necessarily be thinking possession and witches. You'd be thinking someone's kind of going crazy and stuff like this, or just being paranoid. But it's never really addressed. I think the characters in this movie seem to jump on the fact that there's some kind of supernatural force here a little bit too easily without kind of even. I know it's a kind of a stressful situation here, but they just seem to kind of gravitate to this particular conclusion without any real sort of like reason to, if you ask me. I mean, you surely the first. There's a character who the first one to kind of like really kind of show any type of signs of going a little bit crazy. But we know that she has a traumatic event. It's even established she's taken some type of medical drugs and stuff. But it's kind of like people are very quick to jump on she must be possessed, when we as an audience, we know we're watching a movie called The Witches in the Woods and there's creepy music and stuff like that. But if you put yourself in the character's shoes, you wouldn't really think that. So it just seemed to be a little bit of false drama. And to go hand in hand with that, there's also a lot of kind of characters that seem to be out doing stuff for no particular reason, just for dramatic effect. There's a couple of instances here where characters just seem to do odd things, and when it's all said and done, there's no real explanation for it outside of they wanted to have a kind of like a moment to try and kind of like, oh my god, something's happening, and when really there's no real reason for them to do that. People moving to different areas and kind of standing out in the woods not doing really anything. Now, what I said at the beginning of the film left up to interpretation. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but I feel I have to kind of address it. So if you don't want to know the spoiler, obviously stop watching now. But the whole point of this movie is there may or may not be some type of supernatural presence. Everything that you see in the movie could be down to simply people's paranoia and kind of like stress of the situation. And plus, there's kind of some characters here who have gone through a traumatic event. However, there could be some type of supernatural force. It is entirely up to your preference, I suppose, and what you choose to believe. Some people may find that a little bit frustrating. I've got to say, I don't think the film did a good enough job of really giving you any type of proof one way or the other, and that's probably by design. But like I've said, there's nothing really here that kind of suggests any type of supernatural outside of that we're watching a film called Witches in the Woods, and there's spooky music and kind of like some edits that kind of makes things seem creepy, but if you were living it, there just isn't. So yeah, it works. I feel like a psychological horror film where people are going into a kind of they're panicking, they're kind of getting stressed and kind of making rash decisions and stuff like that. That to me works better than the suggestion of kind of anything supernatural here, which I feel is a little bit too underplayed. There's not really, I mean, outside of it, just kind of like what we kind of want to believe this because we want to watch a horror film. There's not really anything there, and I think that it needed to have a little bit, it needed to be a little bit more ambiguous, because to me it doesn't really seem as ambiguous as it thinks it is. Overall, though, it's a good character movie. I think the characters are well defined and kind of like and somewhat believable. I don't think it will work quite as well as it thinks it does in regards to this kind of like ambiguous kind of like, is there supernatural or isn't there? I think it maybe leans into too much that there isn't, and we just kind of meant to believe that there is because the movie wants to be called Witches in the Woods and things. And then there's just some kind of stuff which is just done, it just comes out of realism and just kind of like, we did this scene and we had this character say this or go in this position for dramatic effect without it really seeming logical to the actual film. But overall, I enjoyed the film because there is good character work, and visually it's very, very atmospheric and stylish. In that respect, I will give it an above average mark, though I don't think it particularly works story-wise as well as it wants to. So 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.